So I play a majority of my games on my PC, and that means that a majority of my games I control with a keyboard and mouse. However, there is a pretty large handful of games that I prefer playing with the controller. Things like racing games, certain adventure games, certain third person games, and I've been playing a lot more of those recently as well. And great timing, Mamba sent over their Manba One controller, which has some really unique features. And we're going to go ahead and get this thing unboxed. We're going to talk about some specs and features. We're going to get some good use out of it, and we'll talk about what I like and what I don't like about it. But I do think it's going to pack a pretty good punch for its price point. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about some specs. So, right out the get go, you can see that the Manba One has a screen on it. Now, this screen, I don't believe does anything for any of the games. It is mainly just to be able to control the controller. Now, what that does mean is that you don't need software to control this controller, to change any of the settings, anything like that. You can do it all directly on the controller itself, which is super handy, especially when you're going between systems, between computers, all that fun stuff. They also advertise it as having LED, micro buttons, and we'll talk about what the micro buttons mean a little bit later, a hybrid D pad, and the big feature is Hall effect joysticks and Hall effect triggers. Now, Hall effect joysticks are extremely great for controllers. The main now, Hall effect joysticks are fantastic for controllers, the main benefit being that they don't suffer from stick drift. They use an entirely different technology, and it does make them much more durable in long term use. The other great thing about Hall effect joysticks is that they can be adjusted through software to have different responses to your movements. So, for example, here there's a couple of different modes that you can use. Now, I feel like I'll probably just stick to default because it's what I'm used to, but you do have these other options available to you that adjust the way that the controller sends those signals to your game based on the thumbstick movement. So that's pretty cool. And they mention here the anti drift and the dead zone that's adjustable for FPS games. Now, this controller also comes with Hall effect triggers, and Hall effect triggers, again, can be adjusted through software, and they just have that longer durability. This controller also has trigger locks, and trigger locks are really great. They're on the Xbox Series. They're on the Xbox Elite controller, and I've talked about that in the past and how much I really do like that controller. And the trigger locks are extremely handy. You would put it on full articulation if you want to be playing something like a racing game, where if you're using your trigger and if you have it at halfway, it's only sending half the signal to whatever you're doing. So it's going to do half the gas pedal. It's going to adjust the amount of power input based on how far you have your trigger pressed down. But the short articulation is really great when you want to have the fastest response time and the trigger is only turning something on and off. So something like a shooting game where your trigger is just going to be shooting the gun or not shooting the gun. If you hold it halfway, it's going to shoot it the exact same ways if you hold it the whole way down. That's where the short articulation can come in extremely handy. They also advertise as having an Alps bumper. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I guess we'll find out once we get a little bit more use out of the controller. This controller also has programmable back buttons. So that's really cool. You can use them in a single mode so that the button will just trigger any kind of single input, or you can make macros out of it to do a whole bunch of inputs. So that could be super handy depending on the types of games that you're playing. You're also able to set up configurations. So there's 4 configurations here, config 1, 2, 3, and switch, and you can adjust the buttons, the joysticks, the triggers, and the vibrations for all of those configurations. So if you want to use a certain type of joystick mode for one particular game and then a different joystick mode for another game, you can set that up. If you want to reduce your vibration when playing a racing game versus when playing something else, you can adjust that. And that's pretty cool, very quick and easy to change. They also have turbo and mapping modes, which they advertise as playing arcade or action games easier, where you can trigger certain buttons as other buttons. Pretty interesting. Now, as mentioned, it does have RGB, so you can customize the colors and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that'll eat away at your battery. And you're able to adjust the vibration, as we mentioned before as well. Now, you can also buy additional joysticks, so it only comes with the short joysticks by default, but you can buy longer joysticks that'll give you finer racing control, for example. I think they should have just included these with the controller. It seems silly that they're not included. I'm sure they're not very expensive pieces, and having to buy something entirely separate for this just seems a little bit silly in my opinion. The Elite controller is a lot more expensive, yes, but it does come with these, which is nice. I just don't really think that these cost enough for them to not include it in the packaging. The controller also has magnetic covers, so you can buy the controller in either black or white. The black comes with this textured black plastic. The white comes with a clear plastic cover. And if you want to switch between them, you can buy an additional cover, and it's just a magnet. You can pull it off and replace it, which is really interesting. The controller also comes with a wireless charging dock. It allows for smart wake up, so as soon as you lift the controller off the dock, it wakes up the controller. It'll also remind you to charge it. And you are able to store the USB adapter in the dock, and I believe you're able to use the dock as the dongle by plugging the dongle somewhere into the dock. We'll talk about that when we get into the unboxing. And with that said, let's get to the unboxing. Okay, here's the box, and we've got the controller and the stand on the front. If we turn it over, it mentions the Hall Effect joysticks, the full color LED screen, 4 remappable back buttons, which is really nice to have. I really did like that on my Elite controller. And Hall Effect triggers as well. On the top, we have the brand. On the bottom, we just have some information and what's in the box, but we're going to find that out once we get this open. So, this is a slide open case. And then we go ahead and lift that open. And this is really nicely packaged. Go ahead and take this out. So now we have the controller first. And they have these little protective rings on the thumbsticks. So there is the controller. The front plastic is like an acrylic, so it's very, very smooth to the touch, not much grip feeling on there. Very different than what I'm used to with a lot of the Xbox controllers I have. One of the Xbox controllers is a little bit like this though. They have the ABYX format on this controller. So this controller is very similar to an Xbox controller in terms of looks and everything, as you can tell. We have the screen with a little removable cover. We have 4 buttons on the bottom here. We have a D-pad. The feeling of everything is very different from a standard controller already. These buttons feel very different from what I'm used to. The thumbsticks don't feel different, but they may act a little bit different in game because they are Hall Effect. The D-pad feels very different. It's not overly satisfying in terms of the clickiness. And it's a little bit hard to tell sometimes what direction is clicking, but then we have the back here. So just like the Xbox Elite controllers, we have the ability to change the depth of the triggers. So this is the full depth, and then if I bring this down, it changes the depth, as you can see there. So if I have one on full depth, one not, you can see one goes in a lot further. So this is kind of like a little hair trigger, which is kind of cool. And then we have the 4 buttons on the back. Then we have the on-off switch there, and then the pins for the charging. And we have the charging dock and the dongle for the controller. So the charging dock just works just like that. It sits pretty nice on there. Uses USB-C. And this compartment, I thought it was just to store the USB, but it actually has a port in there. So I wonder if you can plug the USB port into this port and then plug this into your computer, and then it'll charge, and the dock will also act as the dongle. We'll check the manual. All right, so we're got the controller on. There's RGB on either side here, so that's cool. And then we have our screen, and we currently have it on the dongle PC mode. We can press this button here to go into our main menu. So you have the PC, Switch, Android, and iOS modes. And all of the navigation is done with these buttons and the D-pad, it seems. So if we go over and we go to our settings, we can have up to 3 configurations plus some switch options as well. So that's also nice. It seems like these are the only settings though. There doesn't seem like there's any additional settings. So we can change the way that the buttons are mapped. So that's interesting. We can change the curve and the dead zone on the thumbsticks. So that's also very interesting. We can change the dead zone and the stroke for the triggers without, and this is going to be due to the sensors because they're Hall Effect, not utilizing the actual adjustment on the back. And then you can adjust the vibration strength of the controller as well. Now it also has the ability to adjust the language. I believe we have English, Korean, and Chinese. We're able to calibrate the joysticks, the trigger, and the motion control. This does have built-in motion control, so that's great for the Switch. And then you have the ability to test all your buttons. So A, B, Y, X. So that's pretty cool. And then we're able to change the display. So we can change the brightness of the actual display here. So if we want to drop it down a little bit, we could do so. I'll put it on full for the purpose of this video. You can change the LED colors on the side. So right now it's going through a polychrome kind of thing, but you can change it to a singular color if you wanted to. And then you can also change the mode. So right now it's on a breathing mode. So it's just going to kind of go across everything. You can have it just an always on, and you can have them off to save some battery life. So what I'm going to do is, this actually is really good timing. I recently hurt my back and I've been stuck on the couch playing games, really, because I haven't really been able to go around to do much. So I'm going to get some testing in with this controller. I'm going to see how it is for maybe a week or so, see how I feel about it. We're going to get some different shots in there. We're going to see how it works with my Switch, with my Steam Deck, with my computer, with my NVIDIA Shield. We'll see how well it works with all of those. And then we'll be back in a little bit. So see you in the cut. All right, so it's been a few weeks now, and I have gotten a lot of use out of this controller. It came at a perfect time. I actually ended up hurting my back almost right after receiving the controller, and I was unable to sit up or stand for well over a week. It was really bad, and that meant that I was laying down on the couch playing games, and I streamed like that for quite a while, and I got a lot of use out of this controller. So perfect timing from Manba, thank you very much. But that gave me a lot of time to think about the things that I really do like about this controller and things that maybe I don't like so much about a controller. Let's go ahead and talk about those. So one of the first things is the position of these buttons. I felt like I was hitting this back button accidentally all the time when hitting down on the D-pad, because as you can see, they are very, very close together. And if I hit the D-pad like this with like the edge of my thumb, I'm pressing both buttons down at the same time. And it became a little bit of a problem. The position of these isn't great, and it took a little bit of time to get used to. I don't hit this nearly as much anymore, but it does happen from time to time, and then it opens up a menu or does a whole bunch of different stuff. So not a big fan of that positioning. Another thing is, as cool as this clear plastic looks, it is not great if you have clammy hands. I have clammy, hot hands, and this gets really, it just adds to the clamminess. It gets a little bit slippery. It just feels extra sweaty. Not a big fan. So if you have clammy hands like me, you're probably better off getting the black one or getting the white one and then buying the black cover so you can switch it out. It looks great. It doesn't feel terrible, but it just, over time, when I would play for, over 30 minutes, I could start to feel the clamminess, and it was very, very noticeable. So that's another thing that I wasn't a big fan of with the controller. Now, another thing is the back buttons on this controller. Now, I don't find their positioning particularly good. When I'm holding the controller in my normal position, it rests on the bottom ones, and I have to move that finger up to use the top ones. It is unlike the Elite controller, where you're able to use them with both sets of fingers, and you don't have to move one finger between all the buttons. So, for example, I have it right here, and you can use these buttons with separate fingers, and you don't have to move a finger around. So I don't know if it's a cost thing. I don't know if it's a patent thing. I do wish that you were able to use the buttons the same way as the Elite controller. I find that I just wasn't using these nearly as much, or I was only using these bottom ones and not these top ones, because I just didn't like having to move my fingers up to that position to use those back buttons. Another thing is the bumpers just feel so different from a standard controller. They're very, very clicky. They don't feel as, on the Xbox controllers, they feel a little bit trigger-like. They have a little bit more movement to them. Whereas on these, there's not a lot of movement to them, as you can see. They're just very, very short. It's not a major issue. It just took some time for me to get used to, and I did feel like in certain situations it was great because it really quickened how quickly I could press some of these buttons. So for certain games, for example, with Ghost of Tsushima, I found like I was able to parry a lot better using the bumpers, so that was great. But in other games, I just felt like it was a little bit more difficult to get what I wanted to do because I was just used to being able to press down a little bit and then press down, and I just felt like you can't really do that with these ones. Now, another thing is these face buttons are very, very different. So as they talk about in their advertising, these are called micro buttons. They're very different from a standard face controller button on something like an Xbox controller. They feel super different. They have a very different articulation. It is extremely noticeable. You use them a lot in most games. And I found myself liking them in certain situations, very similar to the bumpers. I found myself liking them in certain situations and not liking them in others. So that is something to keep in mind. Here, I'm going to just switch my microphone so that you can go ahead and hear the difference between those buttons. And you can also see the articulation difference between the buttons as well. So give me one sec. So yeah, I'm hoping that audio came through, but yeah, very, very different in terms of these face buttons feeling. Again, in certain situations, it felt great. It felt like they were much more responsive because they articulate and they click so much earlier than a standard controller. But in other situations, they just felt a little bit funky. It felt unnatural just because I'm so used to the way that the other buttons have been for majority of my life. I've used Xbox controllers, and switching over to this just does feel a lot different. But it wasn't a major downside because I did end up enjoying it for certain situations. Now let's talk about some things I really do like about the controller, and the main one is going to be overall comfort. Now I talked about how I don't like this plastic shell, but overall the comfort of this controller is great. It feels like an Xbox controller in terms of its shape, which is what the shape that I personally prefer. It feels nice. It's not overly light. It's not overly heavy. It feels good in the hands. And I felt myself, I've used this for multiple hours at a time, up to 3 or 4 hours playing a game, and it felt great. There is a little bit of a ridge here on the inside that I'm not a big fan of right here. If they do end up redesigning the controller, I really do wish they would change that because where I have my hand sitting when I'm holding the controller, so if I'm holding it like this, my middle finger sits right here and you can kind of see this little ridge here, and it's not great. But other than that, the controller is very comfortable and I really did enjoy using it. Another thing, as we can see here, the battery life on this thing is great. So this is the battery after I've been playing for about 4.5 hours without charging it. So the battery life on this controller is also great. I used it in multiple scenarios. So I used it with the screen and the RGB at the standard default settings, and I never got to a point where I felt like I needed to charge it in while gaming. And I played up to I think 6.5 hours without even being worried about it. So that's great. The another thing is the charger works very, very well and very, very quickly. It charges this thing up very, very efficiently. So I'm really impressed by that as well. And if you want to improve the battery life, you just turn off the RGB if you don't really care about it. I would turn it off. I just had it on for testing purposes, but I would personally turn this off. It's not a really big deal for me. And I would dim the screen brightness quite a bit because I don't end up using the screen all too much. Now, I really did like the way that the Hall effect thumbsticks and the triggers felt. Everything felt really, really good. I really liked playing racing games with this controller. It felt fantastic. I was very pleased playing things like Forza Horizon and stuff with the thumbsticks and the triggers. I really, really liked using this controller, and I found myself using it over using my Xbox controller. Not just because I was testing it, but even in times where I was just kind of doing things offline on my own, I really did feel myself using this one. Now, as mentioned previously, the screen does seem like it's a little bit of a waste, honestly. I wish that it would just have a mode where you can turn off the screen after, you know, 30 seconds, a minute of not interacting with the menus in it so that you could save even more battery life because it isn't showing you anything that the game is being played on, right? It's just going to show this while you're playing a game, and then you would go ahead and enter your menu to change settings. So it would have been really, really nice if this would be able to just be turned off when you're not interacting with it, just to save some more battery life. Now, talking about these buttons now, this controller does seem to show up in games as like an old Xbox 360 controller. So the start button, the icon that shows up for it is the old Xbox 360 button. So that's very, very interesting. This home button acts like your Xbox button. So when you press it, it'll go ahead and launch either Steam or it will launch your game bar. So that's very, very interesting as well. It ended up being relatively handy and I used it a decent amount. So it was great. And I also used it while on the NVIDIA Shield and it worked well as well. Now, all that's great, but what does the controller cost? And the controller is currently priced at $70 US if you buy it directly from Manba, although it does often go on sale both on Manba's website and on Amazon. I believe it is currently on Amazon right now for a little bit of a discount. You can also get discounts directly through Manba, so they do have typically a 10% off coupon that's always available as well. But at $70, I think this controller is providing an insane amount of value. I would happily pay $70 for a controller like this. I do wish that there were some things to be changed, but overall, I loved using this controller. As mentioned, I continue to gravitate back towards it and using it a lot. I didn't use all of its features all the time, but it's nice to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them. So I really did like this controller. I really did feel like I used it a lot. I'm continuing to use it every time that I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima. I am playing with this controller and I really do enjoy it. And at the $70 price point, I think it is really providing a ton of value, especially when you compare it to a lot of the things that it's competing against, punching well above its weight. You know, things like the Elite 2 controller are $200. The DualSense Edge controller is $200. The Switch Pro controller is around $80 to $90, depending on if you go for the old or the newer version. And this controller is $70 at its most expensive. So I think it is really providing a lot of really great value at that price point. And I'm overall super happy with it. I didn't pay for this controller, but I would happily pay for this controller, especially if they fixed a lot of the things that I'm not really particularly happy about, which we talked about. And that kind of brings us to how I feel about the controller overall. I do wish there are some things that they would fix in this controller, maybe in the next version, the next redesign. But overall, I do feel like the controller is great. I continue using it. I really do enjoy it. Ghost of Tsushima has been fantastic on this controller. Forza Horizon has been fantastic on this controller. Even playing Gears of War, the new Gears of War remaster, I've been playing that with my friend Andreas. It's been great on this controller. Overall, I'm super happy with it. And I'm really curious what you guys think. Is this something that you guys would be interested in picking up? Are there certain features that you really do like with this controller? Are there certain features that you think are kind of a waste? Do you agree or disagree with some of my pros and cons? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think. And with all that said, I really do hope you found this video helpful. And if not, I at least hope you found it interesting. And if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribed. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can leave those down in the comment section below, and I'll try to get to them all as quickly as I can. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors, and big thanks to you for watching to the end of this video. If you want to see any other videos where I talk about products and review them, you can check out the video playlist right up here. And as always, stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.